Montana Territory, 1872. The evening sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Silver Creek, a frontier town where hope and hardship walked hand in hand. 25-year-old Vaughn Young sat atop his chestnut stallion, surveying the settlement he'd avoided for months. His lean, muscular frame remained tense as he adjusted his worn Stetson over sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His clean-shaven face betrayed his youth, though his deep-set hazel eyes held the weathered look of a man who'd seen too much too soon. "No sense delaying," he muttered to his horse. "Town means supplies, not trouble. Not this time." Vaughn had learned young that attachments were dangerous in the unforgiving West. After losing his parents to frontier violence and his brother to consumption, he'd built his life around a simple truth: a lone wolf survives while the pack falls prey. The cattle ranch he worked was miles from civilization, and he preferred it that way. People complicated things, women especially. As Vaughn guided his horse down the main street, the sound of commotion drew his attention to the small white church at the edge of town. A crowd had gathered, their excited chatter carrying on the breeze. Curiosity got the better of him, though he maintained a cautious distance. Jilted at the altar, an old woman whispered loudly to her companion. "Poor Rebecca Zimmerman. That Richardson boy ran off with a saloon girl from Billings last night. Her daddy spent a fortune on this wedding," another added. "All those folks from 3 counties here to witness." Vaughn's gaze was drawn to the church steps where a young woman stood frozen in shock. Even from this distance, he could see she was beautiful, 20 years old at most, with golden hair arranged in an elaborate updo, a few loose curls framing a face that seemed carved from porcelain. Her white wedding dress, adorned with delicate lace and pearl buttons, caught the fading sunlight. What caught Vaughn's attention wasn't her beauty, though it was considerable, but the way she held herself. While tears streamed down her face, her back remained straight, her shoulders squared. This was no wilting flower, but a woman of quiet strength facing public humiliation with dignity. Something in his chest tightened uncomfortably. He knew better than to get involved in other people's troubles. The West had taught him that lesson repeatedly, yet he couldn't tear his eyes away from her. "Rebecca, please come inside." An older woman, her mother, Vaughn guessed, pleaded, trying to shield her from prying eyes. But Rebecca Zimmerman shook her head, golden curls catching the light. "I'll not hide away as though I've done something shameful." That's when her gaze met his across the distance. Something passed between them, a moment of recognition though they'd never met. In her tear-filled blue eyes, Vaughn saw a mirror of his own determination to survive whatever the frontier threw his way. The moment shattered when a drunken voice called out, "Guess she wasn't worth marrying after all." Before Vaughn realized what he was doing, he'd urged his horse forward, positioning himself between the crowd and Rebecca. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable edge of a man who meant business. "Show some respect." The heckler, seeing the steel in Vaughn's eyes, mumbled an apology and slunk away. "I don't need rescuing," Rebecca said, her voice stronger than her tear-streaked face suggested. "I know." Vaughn surprised himself with a small smile. But sometimes even the strongest need a friend. In that moment, Vaughn felt something shift inside him, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of his carefully constructed solitude. It terrified him. 3 days later, Vaughn was loading supplies onto his pack horse when he spotted Rebecca walking purposefully down the street. Gone was the wedding dress, replaced by a practical blue cotton dress that complemented her eyes. Her golden hair was neatly braided, wrapped around her head like a crown. "Mr. Young," she called, using the name she'd learned from the shopkeeper. "I wanted to thank you properly." "Nothing to thank me for, Miss Zimmerman," he replied, busying himself with a stubborn rope. "On the contrary, your kindness meant a great deal when others were cruel." Her direct manner caught him off guard. "Father says I should remain in seclusion until the gossip dies down." "I disagree." Vaughn found himself smiling despite his better judgment. "The West isn't kind to those who hide away." "Exactly." She glanced at his supplies. "You're leaving?" "Back to the Triple M Ranch. Boss needs hands for the spring roundup." Rebecca seemed to weigh something in her mind before speaking. "Mr. Young, I'm in need of employment. I was wondering if you know of any positions suitable for a woman at your ranch or nearby." Vaughn nearly dropped his supplies. "Miss Zimmerman, a cattle ranch is no place for a woman?" She raised an eyebrow. I've managed my father's household accounts for years. I can cook, clean, mend, and I'm not afraid of hard work. Your family would allow this? Her expression hardened. After the humiliation I've suffered, they'd prefer I disappear for a while. Father has arranged a marriage to a widower in St. Louis, a man 3 times my age with 5 children. She straightened her shoulders. I'd rather make my own way. Vaughn recognized the determination in her eyes, the same resolve that had kept him alive after losing everything. Against his better judgment, he heard himself say, "The ranch owner's wife has been looking for help with the house and the ranch accounts." The smile that broke across Rebecca's face was like sunrise after a long, cold night. "When do we leave?" "We? Miss Zimmerman, I can't possibly. I have references from the bank where I've helped Father. I can ride, Mr. Young. And I need to leave Silver Creek immediately." Her voice dropped. "Please. I'm not asking for charity, just an opportunity." Something in her plea resonated with memories of his own desperate escape from a past that threatened to define him. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Vaughn found himself nodding. "We leave at dawn. Pack light." As they rode out the next morning, Vaughn maintained a professional distance. Rebecca, dressed in a practical riding skirt and jacket, handled her horse with surprising skill. The early morning light caught in her golden hair, now braided simply down her back. "My father would never allow me to ride astride," she confessed with a small smile. "But Mother taught me when he was away on business." "You ride well," Vaughn admitted grudgingly. "There's a great deal about me people don't know," she replied, her blue eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. The journey to Triple M Ranch would take 3 days. Vaughn had planned every aspect meticulously, mapping out safe places to camp and calculating provisions. What he hadn't accounted for was the way Rebecca's presence would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and the life he'd built. That first evening, as they made camp beside a small creek, Vaughn was surprised when Rebecca efficiently helped with the horses and gathering wood for a fire. When he returned from hunting with a pair of rabbits, she had water boiling and biscuit dough ready. "You don't have to prove yourself," he said, cleaning the rabbits away from camp. "I'm not proving anything. I'm earning my keep." She worked the dough with practiced hands. "Why did you help me that day at the church?" The question caught him off guard. Seemed like the right thing to do. Rebecca studied him. "You don't strike me as a man who involves himself in others' affairs easily." Vaughn remained silent, focusing on preparing the meat. "You know what Thomas said when he left me that note?" Her voice was steady, though he detected the pain beneath. "He said a frontier wife needs to be sturdy stock. That I was too delicate for the life he wanted." Vaughn glanced up, genuinely surprised. He must not have been looking at the same woman I see. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Their eyes met across the campfire, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Later, as they sat beside the fire eating their simple meal, Rebecca asked, "What brought you to the frontier, Mr. Young?" "Vaughn," he corrected. "Out here, formalities seem pointless." "Vaughn?" she repeated, and something about the way his name sounded in her voice made his chest tighten. "I came west after the war. Needed space to breathe." "You fought?" He nodded, the memories still raw. "Union Army. Lost my brother at Gettysburg. Parents to fever the year before." "I'm sorry," she said simply. "The frontier doesn't ask about your past," Vaughn continued, surprising himself with his openness. "Just whether you can survive the present." Rebecca nodded, her face thoughtful in the firelight. "Perhaps that's what I need. A place where I'm not defined by what happened at that church." "What will you do if Mrs. Mitchell doesn't hire you?" Vaughn asked. "Move on. Find something else." Her determination was palpable. "I refuse to be the tragic figure of Silver Creek gossip or some old man's convenient wife." As they settled into their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, Vaughn found himself studying the stars, troubled by unfamiliar emotions. Rebecca Zimmerman was dangerous, not because she posed any threat, but because she made him question the walls he'd built around himself since losing his family. The next day brought unexpected challenges. Dark clouds gathered by midday, and the temperature dropped rapidly. "We need shelter," Vaughn called over the rising wind. "There's an abandoned trapper's cabin a few miles east." They barely reached the cabin before the skies opened. The structure was small but sound, with a stone fireplace and a roof that leaked only in one corner. "It's not much," Vaughn apologized as he built a fire. Rebecca moved around the small space, wiping dust from the lone table. It's perfect, safe from the storm. As thunder crashed outside, they settled by the fire with coffee Vaughn had packed. Their wet clothes hung nearby to dry, leaving Rebecca in her simple cotton shift and Vaughn in his undershirt and trousers. The impropriety of their situation wasn't lost on either of them. "Tell me about the Triple M," Rebecca said, breaking the awkward silence. "Mitchell's a fair man. Built something from nothing after coming west 15 years ago. His wife Emma's from Boston originally. Never quite adjusted to frontier life." Vaughn stared into his coffee. "She'll like you. She misses civilization, people who can talk about books and music. And you? What do you miss?" The question caught him off guard. "Nothing worth mentioning." Rebecca studied him. "I don't believe that. Everyone misses something." The firelight caught the gold in her hair, turning it to flame. Vaughn looked away. "Family. Maybe," he admitted reluctantly. "Not the people themselves. They're long gone. But the feeling of belonging somewhere. Is that why you stay so far from towns? Because it's easier than remembering what you've lost?" Her insight cut too close. "You ask a lot of questions. I'm trying to understand the man who's escorting me into a new life." Her blue eyes held his. "The man who said their loss is my treasure when he thought I couldn't hear him." Heat rose in Vaughn's face. He had indeed muttered those words to his horse after their encounter, never imagining she'd overheard. "I spoke without thinking," he said stiffly. "Did you mean it?" The storm outside matched the turmoil within him. Rebecca Zimmerman had walked into his carefully ordered existence and upended everything. She made him want impossible things: connection, family, a home that was more than just shelter from the elements. "I meant that any man foolish enough to abandon you doesn't deserve you," he finally said. Rebecca set down her cup and moved closer, until their shoulders nearly touched. "The frontier teaches harsh lessons about what we can count on," she said softly. "I thought I could count on Thomas, on the future we planned. You thought you could count on isolation to keep you safe. It has so far. Has it?" Her hand found his, her touch warm and steady. "Or has it just kept you lonely?" Vaughn didn't pull away. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel something beyond survival. Desire, yes, but also the terrifying possibility of hope. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the cabin, something fragile and precious was taking root. They reached Triple M Ranch the following afternoon. The main house stood on a gentle rise, with bunkhouses, barns, and corrals spread below. Cattle dotted the vast grasslands stretching to distant mountains. Emma Mitchell, a slight woman with kind eyes, welcomed Rebecca warmly after hearing her story and examining her references. "We desperately need help with the accounts," she confessed. "And I confess, having another woman to talk with would be a blessing." Rebecca's position was secured, room and board plus a small salary in exchange for managing the ranch books and helping with household duties. Vaughn watched her settle in with mixed emotions. Having her at the ranch meant seeing her daily, yet propriety demanded distance between a ranch hand and the lady of the house's companion. For weeks, they maintained careful formality. Rebecca quickly proved her worth, organizing chaotic accounts and discovering discrepancies that had cost the ranch money. Emma blossomed with female companionship, and even gruff John Mitchell admitted Rebecca was worth her weight in gold. Vaughn threw himself into the spring roundup, working from dawn until dusk. Yet despite his best efforts, his eyes sought Rebecca whenever she ventured from the main house, bringing lunch to the workers, hanging laundry, or riding out with Emma to deliver messages. Their conversations were brief, public, and proper, but each glance held the memory of that night in the cabin, of truths spoken by firelight. Everything changed when Rebecca discovered major irregularities in the cattle sales records. "Someone's been skimming money in cattle," she explained to the Mitchells and Vaughn one evening. "Small amounts over time, but it adds up to nearly 200 head and several $1,000s. Mitchell's face darkened. "That's not possible without inside help. I believe the foreman, Davis, is involved," Rebecca said carefully. "The discrepancies align with his trips to sell cattle." "Davis has been with me 5 years, Mitchell protested. "Show me," Vaughn said. Rebecca spread her ledgers across the table, demonstrating with clear precision how the numbers didn't add up. "I'll confront him tomorrow," Mitchell decided. But by morning, Davis was gone, along with the month's payroll and 2 prize horses. "He must have overheard us," Emma fretted. More troubling news arrived days later. A neighboring rancher reported Davis had joined forces with the notorious Harker gang, outlaws who'd been terrorizing the territory. Rumors spread that they planned to raid the Triple M during the upcoming cattle drive to Montana. "We can't abandon the drive," Mitchell said grimly. "We need that sale to keep the ranch afloat after what Davis stole." "It's a trap," Vaughn argued. "They know our route and timing." "Then we change both," Rebecca suggested. The men turned to her in surprise. "I've been studying the maps. There's an alternate route through Blackwater Pass. It adds 3 days but avoids the usual ambush points." "Blackwater is treacherous terrain," Mitchell objected. "So is facing the Harker gang," Rebecca countered. She spread a map on the table. "With careful planning, we can make it work." Her confidence and clear thinking impressed the men. When Mitchell reluctantly agreed to the plan, Vaughn found himself watching Rebecca with new eyes. This was no fragile flower needing protection. This was a frontier woman with courage and intelligence to match any man. That night, Vaughn found Rebecca on the porch, staring at the stars. "That was impressive today," he said quietly. She turned, moonlight silvering her golden hair. "I'm capable of more than keeping books, Vaughn." "I never doubted it." He moved closer. "Rebecca, when this cattle drive is over, I'd like to court you properly. If you'd permit it." The smile that bloomed across her face made his heart race. "I'd like that very much." Their moment was interrupted by a rider approaching at speed, the neighboring rancher's son, with urgent news. The Harker gang had moved up their timeline. They were coming tonight. The next hours passed in controlled chaos. Women and children were hidden in the root cellar. Men positioned themselves around the property. Mitchell sent a rider for the marshal, but help would arrive too late. Rebecca refused to hide. "I can shoot," she informed Mitchell, producing a small derringer. "My father insisted I learn." Vaughn tried to protest, but the determined look in her eyes silenced him. He handed her his spare revolver instead. "This has better range. Stay inside and watch the windows." As dusk fell, the first shots rang out. 7 riders attacked from the east, firing wildly at the main house. The ranch hands returned fire from carefully planned positions. Vaughn picked off one attacker before being forced to retreat behind the barn when bullets splintered would near his head. From his new position, he saw with horror that 3 riders had circled around, heading for the back of the main house, where Rebecca was stationed alone. Vaughn ran, keeping low, fear driving him faster than prudence. He reached the back porch just as the first outlaw dismounted. Inside, he heard Rebecca's warning shout followed by a gunshot. Breaking through the door, Vaughn found one attacker down, clutching his shoulder where Rebecca had shot him. She stood behind an overturned table, revolver steady as the second man advanced. The third came through the window behind her. "Rebecca!" Vaughn shouted, firing at the window climber, catching him in the chest. She whirled, narrowly avoiding the second man's grasp. Vaughn tackled him, and they crashed into the kitchen table. The outlaw was bigger, stronger, but Vaughn fought with the desperation of a man protecting something more precious than his own life. A sickening crack sounded as the outlaw's head hit the edge of the stone hearth. He went limp. Outside, shots continued, but were becoming sporadic. Rebecca rushed to Vaughn's side. "You're bleeding." He hadn't noticed the knife wound in his side. "It's nothing. Don't you dare minimize this," she said fiercely, pressing a cloth to the wound. "I will not lose you just when I've found you." Their eyes met, and in that moment of danger and revelation, Vaughn realized the truth he'd been fighting for weeks. He loved this golden-haired woman with every fiber of his being. "You won't lose me," he promised. "I'm too stubborn to die." By morning, the Harker gang was defeated, 3 dead, 2 captured, including Davis, and the rest fled. 2 ranch hands suffered minor injuries. Only Vaughn's wound was serious, though the doctor assured them it would heal clean. As he recovered in the main house under Rebecca's watchful care, Vaughn had time to think. The attack had shattered his most fundamental belief, that isolation meant safety. It was connection that had saved them all, the ranch hands fighting together, neighbors riding to their aid, Rebecca refusing to abandon him. "I've been thinking," he said one afternoon as Rebecca changed his bandage. "A dangerous pastime," she teased, but her eyes were soft with affection. "I've been saving to buy my own place. I have enough for a small spread north of here." He caught her hand. "It's nothing fancy, but it could be a home. Our home." Rebecca went still. "Vaughn Young." Are you proposing to me? Inelegantly, but yes. He squeezed her hand. I thought I needed to be alone to survive out here. I was wrong. I need you. Are you certain? Her voice held vulnerability beneath the strength. I was left once before. Their loss is my treasure, he said softly, echoing words spoken what seemed a lifetime ago. Rebecca Zimmerman, I would spend my life making sure you never regret choosing a stubborn cowboy who took too long to recognize what was right in front of him. Tears filled her blue eyes, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she whispered, leaning down to kiss him. Yes. They married that autumn, when golden aspens matched Rebecca's hair. The ceremony was small but joyful, held on the porch of their new home, a modest cabin with good grazing land and a creek running through it. The Mitchells stood as witnesses, along with neighboring ranchers who'd come to respect the young couple's courage. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, with wildflowers in her hair. Vaughn, fully recovered and standing tall in a new suit, could barely speak his vows past the emotion in his throat. I promise to cherish you, he managed finally. To protect not just your body but your spirit, to build a life where neither of us ever walks alone again. Rebecca's answering vows were equally heartfelt. I promise to stand beside you through whatever the frontier brings, to face each sunrise with courage and each sunset with gratitude that we found each other. Their first year brought challenges, harsh winter storms, dwindling funds, and the difficult work of establishing a viable ranch. But it also brought deep joy. Their cabin grew warm with shared laughter and whispered confidences. The land responded to their care, cattle thrived, and by spring, Rebecca carried their first child. On their first anniversary, they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Rebecca's hand rested on her rounded belly where their child grew. Do you ever think about him? Vaughn asked quietly. The man who left you at the altar? Rebecca considered the question. Sometimes, not with regret, but with gratitude. Gratitude. She turned to him, her blue eyes clear and certain. If he hadn't left, I would never have found you. Never known what real partnership feels like. She took his hand, placing it where their baby kicked. Never discovered that what seemed like my greatest humiliation was actually my greatest blessing. Vaughn pulled her close, marveling at how completely his life had transformed. The lonely cowboy who once believed the frontier demanded isolation now understood its deepest truth, that survival came not from walls, but from bonds strong enough to weather any storm. Their loss, he murmured against her golden hair, is absolutely my treasure. As the first stars appeared above their land, their home, Rebecca's laughter mingled with the evening wind, a promise of all the days and nights to come.